Hey everybody, looks like we are live. So if anybody's still out there, please say hello. We're getting started a little bit later. I don't know what happened. I restarted my computer. Hi, Rob. I don't know what happened. I'm trying to type here. Okay, hopefully I didn't lose everybody. But hey guys, thanks for hanging in with me. I don't know. I think there's a virus somewhere in cyberspace to top it off. So I'm going to wait till everybody kind of gets a chance to find me again. Hi, Joanna, and hi, Vicky. Yeah, it's a strange world. It just kept buffering like it wasn't going live, and that was very strange. So see if I can get it on my iPad here. There we go. Okay. There we go. Okay. Oops. There we go. Okay. Hi, Dawn. Yes, success, right. And Tuliana, welcome. Thank you guys for being here. I'm just going to kind of hop into these questions because I'm already getting started 10 minutes late. I feel really badly about it. But all I can say is that all the equipment was set up and, you know, my mouse was charged. I have my pen handy. I've got my highlighter here. And in spite of all that, it just didn't come on live. So I hope you're all doing well. This is my way of staying in touch with you. It's just always great to see all familiar names, unfamiliar names, but hello to all of you. I wish I could just watch the chat because for me, that's really exciting, but instead I'm here to answer your questions. So I guess I'll focus on that and try not to look at the chat, but I welcome all of you and I hope you're all very safe. Before I went live, some of you asked if you needed to have a mask. I sure hope not. This is one of the few ways that we can actually connect and not have to have a mask. So again, welcome. This is Pam Caughey. It's Saturday, April 25th, and I'm here because you guys have submitted some awesome questions for this upcoming contest that ends on May 1st. I'll just remind you about that. It's not too late to enter. All you have to do is look in the description box below this YouTube live video, and you'll find a link where you can go and submit a question or submit a challenge. And challenges are, I'll choose 5 winning challenges, painting challenges, and each one will win a $100 cash prize. And because that's something that I can actually get to somebody anywhere around the world. And then I'll choose 10 winning questions, and they're really coming in. They're really exciting. And that's what I'm actually addressing right now is some of your questions. They've been coming in over the last month, and I've just been reading them and enjoying them. And so today I'm just going to jump right in and start answering your questions. Now, I will take a break though, so that if there's anyone who wants to either have me add on to an answer or ask a new question, because I don't want this to be me just talking and you not able to interact with me. I really appreciate you being here on a Saturday. I'm going to start off with, and just as a reminder, I have categorized all the questions into categories like questions that pertain to personal voice, or questions that pertain to a technical issue, or I've got other categories. There are a lot of technical questions, things related to painting process, or an actual challenge. And then the professional topics and design and color principles. So that's kind of the main, I didn't want to have too many different categories, but let me just get started. A question from Robert Adams. He is from Knoxville, Tennessee. And he wrote, I'm always comparing my work to other artists that I admire, and it makes me feel so inadequate. Is there a healthier way to make those kinds of comparisons and come away better for it rather than feeling defeated? That's a great question. I wonder how many of you have ever felt that way when you've gone to a gallery or a museum, or maybe your best friend's studio. Maybe they've got more experience than you. How many of you can go ahead and in the chat, just say if you can relate to Robert. And I know that feeling. And I have to say that I'm not a really big museum goer. I'm not, and it's not because I feel intimidated, it's kind of for different reasons. But in any case, he's feeling intimidated. So what can you do? I would say that if you're feeling intimidated, it's because whoever art you're looking at, that particular artist has found something that they have a lot of conviction about, and they're able to express themselves very, very well. And you admire that. That's great. Now, just because you're not quite there yet, what I would do is oftentimes I do gather images. I'm inspired by many different things. That doesn't mean I'm going to paint like them, but what I'll do is I will collect images of work that I admire, and then I'll try to like ask myself, what is it about that work that I admire? It might be the sense of pattern. It might be the color palette. It might be the fact that there's a lot of quiet space. That doesn't mean that my paintings are going to be identical to the ones that I love that when I see them, but I do try to make mental notes or write them down in a journal or a sketchbook as far as things that I'm really liking. My guess, Robert, is that you're liking some things about the work you see, but probably not everything. And so what you're doing is you're collecting information that is going to help you to find your personal voice. And it's very important to do that. It's a very important practice to look around in the world, not just at artwork, but nature, and just every minute of every day as you're awake, there are things that are going to inspire you. And the moment that happens, I would, if you have a cell phone with you, a smartphone, what I love to do, and I know many people in my PDPC course and Watch, Learn, Grow have their camera handy, their cell phone, and they're taking photos and they're collecting little thumbnails just as a reminder. So what I would, I guess, recommend is don't be defeated. Look at it as take what you like about the work that you see. And you may not like some things about the work you see as well. Write those things down too, because in any one painting, most of us don't like every single thing that's happening. Maybe we do, but even in our own art, there are things that we love, things that we don't love, but it's that contrast of things that we love versus things that we don't love. They're both actually really important. So it's just good to have more of what we love as a kind of like the predominant thing, and less of what we don't love, unless our message is about the pandemic. Then you can throw in all the things you don't like. That's when it's really important to know what don't you like, because if you're responding to COVID-19, I think this is a time to really think about what it is you don't like in a painting and throw it in there, because unless you are a fan of what's going on right now, and I've been thinking about this myself, like how would I express myself? And I have some ideas, and I'm anxious to do that. But anyways, I'm getting off the point there. So thank you, Robert, for that question. I've just highlighted a couple different ones here because we have so many, and I know I can't answer them all in an hour. So here's a question from Charlene Horak. She's saying, well, I'm having a lot of fun just experimenting and playing and getting to know my oil paints. Can other mediums be mixed or added, like liquid, stand oil, linseed oil, and so many others? Separately or even together, can you possibly have a layer of oils with various mediums added and then let that layer dry and then do cold wax over that? Do these other mediums hurt the integrity of the cold wax? Okay, so I chose to answer that question today because it really does matter what you do. And I know that there are a lot of people, like, she was starting kind of from scratch with cold wax and oil, or just getting to know her oil paints. And there's so much information out there, but it can be very confusing. So it's not uncommon for people to grab linseed oil and walnut oil and safflower oil and turpentine and think you can just throw the whole thing together and start painting. Well, you can, but it's probably better if you know a little bit about what is going on when you actually do that. So let's just break this into two things. We've got traditional oil painting and we've got cold wax medium and oil painting. Those two things are very, very different. So Charlene is mentioning things like, the walnut oil, the safflower oil, the liquid, and these are things that are used in traditional oil painting, which is what scared me away from oils for couple decades. I never wanted to pursue oil painting because of that, because of a principle called fat over lean. And fat over lean, what that means is that you have your base layer has less fat, and then the next layer has a little bit more fat and a little bit more fat. The fat in oil painting comes from the oil paints that you use, because the composition is there's oil in your paint. So now you can go the traditional route and you can do all those things as long as you keep in mind that as you increase the layers of your paintings, you continue to add a higher amount of fat. I didn't want to do that. And that's why I'm a cold wax and oil artist. The advantage of that, there are many, but with regard to her question, the thing that is going to save you when you use cold wax medium and only that medium, in addition to things like Galkid, which I use, but the main thing is that you never have to worry about fat over lean. Every layer is compatible with the next one. Your composition is going to be strong. The integrity of your paint layers is going to be nice and strong. So that is the answer to your question, is that it does matter. I would not recommend starting out with, say, traditional oils, throwing in any kind of oil that you think you want, that you happen to have handy, and then proceeding on to oil with cold wax medium. It's like one or the other, but you don't want to like have one layer of this and one layer of that, and then go back to one layer of this. Think of it as like, I don't know, the pages of one book. They're all the same story. You don't want to take two books that are completely different, like a child's book and an adult book, and intermix the pages. You're not going to have a very good story. And that's kind of what happens if you try to mix traditional oils and all the things that go with that versus cold wax medium. Cold wax medium in oils is a lot simpler. That's why, that's one of the many appeals for it. It's certainly the reason why it attracted me, because I wanted to play around with oils, but I didn't want to have to worry about fat over lean. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, so Emmy Womack from Tennessee had a question. How do I strike a balance between clean, hard edges and soft edges, loose marks in a painting? And while I think about it, you guys who are chatting, I want to say welcome. And if you guys have a question, please put in all caps question and then your question, because some of you are just chatting and saying hi, and others might have a question related to something I'm talking about. And as I scroll down, try to find your question, what's really going to stand out to me when I go back into this chat is all caps question, okay? Somebody recommended that to me last time, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to try to remember that, and it just popped into my head. So I wanted to mention that. Also, if you guys could just like the video, the YouTube thing, it has to do with YouTube and, you know, how much they promote your channel. And that's just nice if you guys don't mind doing that. And if you're subscribed, that's also really nice. I appreciate it. Okay, so how do you strike a balance between clean, hard edges and soft edges, loose marks in a painting? Now that's from Emmy Womack. And because I do love, and I think edges are so important, but they're one of those things that I think I've only come to appreciate that after many, many years of painting. There's not just hard and crisp and soft. There's also like rough. Imagine that you have a brush that has paint in it, but not a lot of liquid, and you drag it across a canvas or paper, and you get that kind of very highly textured edge. That's a different edge. And then there's a lost and found edge. There's like a weighted line, which is a different kind of edge. So although she's kind of summarizing it into two, I would just say that variety is truly the spice of life. And you kind of want to spend some time doing some sketches or studies, and I will call them experiments. For me, if I were to say, I want to learn more about edges, I want to learn more about color, I want to learn more about brushes, or whatever it is, I just turn it into an experiment and say, okay, this is not going to be a masterpiece. This is going to be an experiment. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't care what's going to happen. All I want to do, the only thing I care about is what am I going to learn? And so that's where the science of art comes in. And all of you out there, your art is a science. And I come from a background that has some science in it. I'm not a scientist, not at all. But what I brought with me, I guess, is, I did do a lot of studying, and I learned how to teach myself. And I think that's just something that I've always looked at when I went from science to art. It just dawned on me that there are so many things an artist has to know. That's why you're here, and that's why I'm here. That's why I teach, because I learn from you when I teach. I don't know everything, and I never will. I don't think anyone out there will. So in answer to the question about anything, and let's just look at edges. I did I went to a live workshop, and I decided that I wanted to have examples of all these different kinds of edges. So my goal then was to create samples on little pieces of paper that showed as many different kinds of edges as I could get. And some of those were with paint, some are with dry mark making materials. But when you spend an hour or two in your studio doing that, and you cut out these little 5x7 pieces and you compile them, you can hang them on your wall as a reminder. As far as the balance between them, I would just say, like all the design elements, not that edges are considered to be an element, but they are part of shape, and they are also part of line. Those two things, shape and line, they will have an edge quality to them. So like all the other elements, one of the things I like to think about in terms of strength in composition is that you want to have a predominance of any one thing. So if you look at edge as being part of shape and edge being part of line, then maybe a majority of your shapes have this kind of an edge, like maybe it's a hard edge, and then you throw in a little soft edge here and there, a little amorphous edge, a little rough edge, just for some spice. But you can't have equal things of everything, or you're going to be really confused. The painting behind me, I could point to some hard edges. I'm kind of looking at it in my computer. I see some hard edges, but I see some soft edges. But I'd say predominantly the painting behind me has hard edges. Now, occasionally I will throw in something different just for variety, but keep in mind that even with edges, you kind of want to have a predominance. I have a question from Vicki K, and I think she might be on this live right now. So if you are there, Vicki, hi. And you write, what are the range of possibilities for sealing and varnishing and or waxing a completed acrylic painting? So I've been talking a lot about oil and cold wax. So let's move on to acrylic. This is an acrylic question. So the first thing that when I read that question, I have some knowledge, but as much as I love acrylic, I have my way of working with it. I have my way of finishing an acrylic painting. That doesn't mean it's the only way. So to give justice to your question, because you're saying, what is the range of possibilities? Well, the range of possibilities is so huge that I went to goldenpaints.com. So that's their website. And I just chose Golden because Golden is very well known for their acrylic products, and they keep innovating. And I love that about this company. Goldenpaints.com. You can call them at 1-800-959-6543. And that's one thing you can do. You can also go to their website. And I even emailed them last week because I anticipated this question and I really wanted to answer it in a way that was thorough. So I reached out to the person who emailed me back, and they're really, really nice. And I said, don't you just have one PDF that explains all of your products and gives like a one-sentence blurb about what your products do? Well, they have so many products that would almost be impossible. So what he told me was that you go to their website, and I just went there before this call, and I looked at their categories, and they have things like varnishes, mediums, paints, things like that. And as far as finishing a painting, what I found when I clicked on that category at their website was they have spray varnish, they have MSA varnish, which is a liquid. I don't know what the MSA stands for, I forget. They have a polymer varnish, which is, again, with the word varnish. And then they have an isolation coat, which you then follow with a top coat. Now, I actually have not I have not used a spray varnish. I think in the long time ago, I did use an MSA varnish. Polymer varnish, I would use a polymer medium, but it does not have the word varnish with it because in my case, not that it really matters because it's just my own personal preference, but people who know the way that I finish an acrylic painting is that I like to finish it with either Liquitex pouring medium or golden self-leveling gel. I think because they're two products that are very much alike. One is golden, one is Liquitex, but I let that dry. And then I have like a 4-step process where the final step is to put a thin layer of cold wax medium on top. And I think when I talk about that, people think that I'm combining cold wax medium with acrylic. And I know it's confusing, but I'm not doing that. I'm only putting the cold wax medium on the very, very top dry acrylic. Let it dry, and then I buff it. And that happens to look like an encaustic painting. That's what I'm going to do to the one behind me. I haven't done that yet. I just got it mounted on panel, and that was enough for now. So I hope that that is helpful. If you ever have a question about anything, and this is for everybody out there regarding any product, look at the manufacturer, do a Google search on what their phone number is, call them up. If you can't reach them by phone, which a lot of times right now during the pandemic, they're not available, there's usually an email. And I would ask them a very specific question and they will get back to you. Okay, so that is a great question. And okay. Suzanne McCrary had a question. There's so many products that extend acrylic paint. So again, this is one I had connected with Vicky's question because they're actually kind of related. There's so many products that extend acrylic paints, glazing liquids, high flow mediums, GAC called GAC, and thinners. Which are most appropriate for what use? Are there advantages or disadvantages in using one or another for a specific purpose? The short answer is that yes, there definitely are going to be some advantages and disadvantages, but I would not be the expert to give you that information because I think like any one of us, we kind of lean toward our favorite products, and I'm not a product expert when it comes to Golden. Many of the things you've mentioned are made by Golden. They're probably made by other companies as well. But when you say GAC, that is a product I know that Golden makes. So again, I would recommend you go to thegoldenpaints.com or call them or email them and ask them, can you give me a summary about your glazing liquids, high flow mediums, GAC and thinners, or just go to their website. And actually, if you pull up the product, there's like a PDF explanation of every single product. A lot of us have to just pick and choose because we can't afford to buy them all. And I think just by reading a really good description by the company, you'll be able to make a decision like which types of effects you want more than others. Okay, great question. All right, now does anyone, I'm just going to see real quick if I see the word question, I'm going to scroll up here and take a little break. I'm tired of just answering my own questions. Hello to everybody who's here. I don't see anyone with like in all caps. I'm going to keep going, and then just keep in mind that if you have a question, either a new one or related to what I'm saying, you can just put in all caps question, and I'll be able to identify it really quickly. Okay, now Dolores Sawinski from North Carolina had a question. She says, how does an artist determine value without taking a black and white photo of the artwork? And I think that's a really good question. Photography and being able to convert things into black and white is something that we can do really quickly now if we have a smartphone. But a long time ago, we didn't have smartphones. And so what did the Impressionists do, or what did any artist do before we had all this high technology? All I can say is that it's a really nice advantage to have a black and white photo. That's easier. But a lot of times, all I can say is that you need that black and white less and less the longer you paint. So it kind of comes down to experience. You start to know that, like on the painting behind me, like this, I'm going backwards, but this yellow ochre color is kind of like, say, this color here. In value, it's kind of like this gray here. So you kind of you squint it's a feeling. You start to feel what is a midtone, and keep it simple. Like, what is the midtone? What is a highlight? And then what is a dark? Well, obviously this line here is a dark, and I can say, okay, that is a light. And then I don't want to say everything in between those two extremes is a midtone, but there are a lot of midtones. We have high key, we have low key, we have middle key. So I think if you're not going to use a black and white photo, I would just kind of continually test yourself. Like if you want to get better at being able to detect value without a black and white, then I would just like test yourself. Take 10 different images of 10 different things. And when you have the color one, circle the areas that you think are midtone, light and dark, then compare it to the value of the black and white. Do that like 10 times, do it 20 times, do it 30 times. You're going to get some things wrong. You're going to get some things right. It's kind of like quizzing yourself. You can quiz yourself, but you will find that the more you do that, the more accurate you become. Like right now, I do still take black and white photos, but before I take the black and white photo and look at it, I try to say, okay, this is what I think it is. I always try to do that now. And then the reason I take the black and white is to either affirm that I'm right or say, oops, I'm not right, and this is why. The more times I do that, the more I refine my ability to judge value. And it's a very, very important question. So that's why I wanted to address that. Okay, so I've got another, let's see, this is, I think, under, it's another technical question by Ian Trott. I believe he's in Canada. All right, so he had a question, and it's kind of a two-part question, but they're related. So let me just see if I can summarize this. He's saying pretty much everything that I read suggests that student grade paint, in this case oils, but we know acrylics can be student grade, watercolors can be student grade, that it has considerably less pigment than artist professional grade paint. And yes, that's true. So when combining with cold wax medium, which increases translucency of oil paint, does that mean using student grade paint would be a better choice when translucency is the main factor for any given layer or layers? Or is it still a better choice to go with artist professional grade paints? And I mean, I had my gut feeling about that, but I wasn't 100% sure. So I reached out to Gamblin Paints. And the reason I'm telling you this is because I do this all the time. And then sometimes I email, sometimes I'm on the phone. If I'm on the phone, I'm taking notes, and then I put them into a Word document, and then I save it into a file so that I can remember the answer to that question. So I was not sure exactly about the answer to that. So I reached out to Scott Gelotley, and they at Gamblin, so many people have been like furloughed and they're not there, the normal people I talk to, but Scott was very helpful. And here's what he wrote back to me. If translucency of paint layers is the main objective, then yes, one would add less artist grade ultramarine blue. Now here's an example, like ultramarine blue, for example, right? Than you would of the 1980 ultramarine blue. So 1980 is their student grade line. It always says 1980 on the tube to get the same effect. In cold wax painting, having more tube color in the mix as a ratio to cold wax medium would make for a more durable painting structure. So in answer to your question, Ian, it is true that you need less of the artist grade if you want the same amount of translucency as using the 1980 paint. The 1980 paint being student grade, you need more of it. So price-wise, you're going to come out about the same, but strength-wise, integrity-wise, because you're using more paint, that layer will probably be a little bit stronger. So it's kind of a trade-off. You're going to save a little money if you buy the student grade paint, but given that you kind of need more of it to get the same amount of transparency, it's not so much a question of cost anymore. I think it's more a question of stability. Because according to Gamblin, the thicker, like the less ratio of cold wax medium to oils, the stronger it is. So that the more you add of that cold wax medium, that's why it's up to 1-to-1. It's because if you go beyond that, you're jeopardizing the integrity of that paint film. So you don't want to do that. So you kind of just use as much as you need. So that was a great question. And he also said 1980 paints. It's a great way for beginning painters to get to know an oil painting palette at a lower investment. True. And some experienced painters prefer the more moderate mixing strength of 1980 student grade, say phthalo green or phthalo blue, because of the less pigment load. They're not going to be as intense. Anyone who's worked with a phthalo color knows how truly intense those colors are. So by using the 1980 line, you're not going to get that same intensity. So that's a great question. Okay, Salim, you posted a question. Here's one from Eileen. I'm just looking real quickly here. Eileen Shalom, question, what kind of large paper did you use for the piece behind me? Okay, that's an easy one. I can answer that. That is Strathmore mixed media paper. And if I had to guess on the weight of it, I think it's like a 140-pound paper. It could be as low as 80, but I kind of doubt it. But anyways, that paper I listed in my resource section. So if you go to artandsuccess.com, scroll down to where I talk about papers. It's in a roll, and I rolled it out, and I painted on it, and then I cut it in half, and then I mounted it on panel. So it is Strathmore mixed media paper. Okay, thank you. That was easy to find. And I'm looking just real quickly here for any other. I think I saw one here by Mary Camblin. Okay, question. After using steel wool to buff acrylic medium and then applying cold wax, is the result shiny? Yeah, so that's a great question, Mary. It's satiny. So, acrylic, normal acrylic is a plastic, so it's going to be pretty shiny. But if you treat it with steel wool and then you put a little layer of cold wax medium and then you let it dry and then you buff it, I call that satin. It is wax. You're looking at that wax top layer, and then it's kind of like this beautiful satiny sheen, much like an encaustic. I put them side by side, and people have actually thought some of my acrylic paintings were encaustic, which of course I love that, because it's like getting the benefit of encaustic without the nightmare of having to ship it and store it. It's a little bit more fragile. So, okay. Salim, here's your question. Can you recommend a book or two that explains acrylic techniques as opposed to teaching how to paint? Yeah, there are just so many out there. I only know that because I used to have some. Stephen Quiller would be one book. That's StephenQuiller. He's got a book that has a lot about acrylic technique, color theory. But if you go to Amazon or just Google like books on acrylic technique or books on acrylic painting, you'll have about 100 pop up. It's not hard to find them, and you can usually get them used. And so I do that a lot. And okay, here's a question from Gretchen Dean. Question, you keep talking about shapes. What are your favorite shapes? And do you try to limit the types of shapes in a piece? That's a good question. And I have to say that I think that as I get older, my answer to that question changes, because early on, I used to love floral shapes, and, I love cows. I kind of had this semi-representational part of me where I wanted to paint things that were kind of somewhat recognizable. But now I'm almost like, I don't want to paint anything that's recognizable. So I would have to say that my shapes now are almost anything but real. I don't know where that puts me. It's kind of like surrealism, but not quite. And there's another question that had to do with surrealism. So without saying too much about that time in art history, I do love geometric shapes. So circles and triangles and squares and, anything like that. But usually it's mixed with the organic type shapes. I like organic shapes, but I just don't like them to be like, oh, it's a starfish, and oh, it's this or that. I don't like it really to be recognizable. I do like to mix and match so that you're not quite sure. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's an interesting one. And just scrolling up here, just going down real quick. Yeah. Okay. Yes, Salim, I did get your question. And one more question from Joy Carter. Question: what are your favorite black markers to use over wet paint, acrylic or oil? Yeah, I do have some favorites. Okay, so one of them is a Sakura paint. I think it's called a paint marker. It's got a purple. I'll have to post it in one of our Facebook groups. I like it. I just used it the other day because it's got a very, very dark line, and it's oil based. It's actually used for marking things like sidewalks, and it's very, very durable. I don't think anything can really. It's very, very permanent. It's a solid marker, so that would be one of my favorites. And it can be used over acrylic, over oils, and then what are some others? There is the unusual names. Yeah, I guess the best thing I can do is just like go to my resource page because I know it's right there. And I'm just like running a blank here as to my favorite things. But yeah, there are quite a few that are quite good. Let's see. Yeah, there it is. Thank you, Karen. Sakura solid marker. What's the one that starts with an M? I'm just like drawing a blank. I know a lot of you guys have them, and there's Posca markers are good. Yes, those are good too. But there's another one that I'm trying to think of. Okay, another question from Kathy. Question: did you gesso the Strathmore paper first before you started drawing and painting on it? No, and the beauty of working on a mixed media paper with acrylic is that you really don't have to gesso it first. If I went into oil and cold wax directly onto that paper, I could have done that, but then I would have gessoed it first. So that's one of the things I love about acrylic, I think, is the fact that you don't always, if it's a board, yes, you do raw wood, you would want to gesso that first, but paper, you don't have to unless you're working on it with oils, then you would. Okay, so yeah, there's Montana marker. There you go, Marabou. Thank you, guys. Thank you. I was like drawing a blank. Marabou, thank you. That's what I was trying to think of. Those are some really good markers. Okay. Well, I'm going to just jump right back into just a couple more questions here from the group that were submitted, and then I'll go back to the chat again. Okay. Water-soluble oils. That is a tempting thing to use. I've used them in the past. And this is from Annie Jabijal. I'm not quite sure how you say her last name. She says, I just did my first cold wax painting. I only use water-soluble oil paints, which is what I use because that is what I have. My question is it okay to use this type of oil paint for mixing with cold wax? And can I use Gamsol or other mediums for oil paint in water mixable oil? Will it create problems in the future? Okay, so I have asked this question to Gamblin because they make their oil paints, and they said you can mix cold wax medium easily, yes, with the water-soluble oils. But when it comes to other solvents, I did a little bit of like searching for that because I know Gamblin said, yes, it's okay to mix the cold wax medium with it. And what I can't remember is whether they said it's okay to add Galkid to it. And then there was the other question about Gamsol. So what I would suggest, Annie, is that you reach out to a company like Gamblin, or you do a Google search. I'm not an expert on water-soluble oils because I don't use them myself, but I do know that it's safe to add cold wax medium. That's a good question. Another question from Diane Prius from Maryland. Says, can watercolor paints be successfully incorporated into either acrylic or oil and cold wax pieces? And if so, what would be the best procedure to follow? And yes, absolutely, because watercolor paints are just water and binder, the pigment binder and then the pigment. And so once it's dry, and I think that's the key, like I could have done on this painting behind me, I could have done a watercolor painting and let it dry. And then I could have proceeded either into acrylic or if I was going to work into oils, I would have then put a clear coat of clear gesso, which is kind of gritty, it's absorbent, and then gone into oil and cold wax. But you can't just go from watercolor to oils on that paper, because you need to have protection for the paper, because oils have acid in them, and that is why you have the gesso barrier, because it's going to adhere to your oils, it's going to protect your paper, it's going to keep tannins from leaching through wood. So yes, you can definitely use watercolor painting, watercolors as a base. And then, okay, so I have another question from Gordon Swayze, who I think is on the live today, which is great. He writes, can a product called Liquin, made by Windsor Newton, be utilized with cold wax and oil, or even with acrylics? And if so, how would you recommend its use? So I did buy some Liquin quite a while ago, and it has a pretty strong odor. Not everybody likes that odor. It can be kind of overwhelming. And it's made by Windsor Newton, and I did reach out to them a long time ago. It is an alkyd resin. So basically, Liquin from Windsor Newton is very much like Galkyd from Gamblin, because they're both considered to be an alkyd resin, which means that they have some oil content. What I do know is that they speed up the drying, so you can use that with your oil and cold wax medium. Sure, why not? Because it's just like Galkyd. It'll have more odor than if you use Galkyd. But like Galkyd, it's going to increase flexibility, and it's going to speed the drying. The greatest benefit of Liquin is that it speeds the drying time. Now, you wouldn't want to use this with acrylic, because it's an oil, it's an alkyd, and you don't want to mix oils with acrylics. So I hope that answers your question, Gordon. Okay. Another good question here from Victoria Scudamore. And she wrote, how do you take great photos of your art with an iPhone? So I'm actually going through this right now, Vicki, and that's Victoria. That's one reason why it kind of caught my attention. Okay, so for the longest time, I used the film, 35 millimeter film camera, a long time ago, decades ago. That was like one thing you had to really learn. And then, we have the cell phones. And then I've been using my cell phone a lot to document my work. And that's fine for the most part, especially if you're going to use the photos for just documenting your artwork, creating an inventory list, give it to a gallery. But if you, and even like print, if you go into print, you write a book or whatever, for 9 times out of 10, a photo these days taken with a pretty high megapixel camera, like 12 megapixels, is going to be a pretty high resolution image. You're going to be okay. Okay, so let's just stick with that, because you're not asking about anything beyond an iPhone. Let's just stick with the iPhone. I would suggest that you have to be really concerned about even lighting. And in my studio, I've got artificial lighting for the most part. And I find that if I have a lot of tables, 6-foot tables in my studio. And I find that if I put a painting underneath the table where it's like not bright light just hitting it, I get a better photo than if I'm like shining lots of light on it, especially if there's glare, because with an iPhone or a smartphone, you cannot decrease the glare. And if you have, something behind glass, you're going to get a reflection. So I would just look for the best lighting. You might want to experiment. Do you put it above your table, under your table, against a wall, on the floor? I actually move my stuff all around the studio to find, where do I get the image on my camera that looks most like my painting. You can use a tripod, to minimize the amount of like shakiness. And then I highly recommend learning to use some type of photo editing software, because though iPhone does have, that editing software there. So that, of course, that does work. But if your painting was not taken like square, like a skewed, like meaning that like the top is more wide than the bottom, then you can either retake the photo or use a photo editing software like Photoshop or something like that to make sure that everything's a right angle. And the reason that matters is because if you're submitting to a juried show or something like that, it does matter. They're going to look at that. And if they see this part underneath my painting, they won't even look at it. If they see anything that's not perfectly square and perfectly cropped, they're just not even going to look twice at it. It doesn't matter how good the painting is. So that's why it's really important. And that's why this question is really a good one. So I hope that answers your question. I'm going to do one last question, then I'm going to go into like you guys just asking me whatever you want because you've been waiting so patiently. Kathy Kitz, Kitz, not quite sure where she's from. She writes, many beautiful colors are not light fast. If you use, say, level 3 light fast colors, do you advise your buyer to place their art in a place that isn't in direct sunlight? So I also looked that up because I looked on 3 different brands of my tubes of oil paint, but there's also watercolor tubes and acrylic. They all have like this light fastness, and I'm sure you guys are very aware of that. And the more traditional way to rate them is in a 1 to 3, like 1, 2, or 3. 1 is the most light fast, and then 3 is the least. So if it's a 3, it's actually considered to be a fugitive color. So her question though is about the number 3s. Yeah, I mean, basically any artwork, no matter what medium it's in, you kind of don't, if anyone buys it, you want to tell them do not hang it in direct sunlight, because direct sunlight, even if it's a number 1, meaning the most light fast, it's just, it's just not really good practice to have any artwork in bright sunlight if you can avoid it, because some fading over time is going to happen. But if it's a fugitive color and it's a number 3, I don't think I would use that color. And when you say that there are many colors that are a number 3, I kind of looked at my favorite colors, and I didn't find one that was a level 3. I do know that Scarlet Lake in Watercolors, which is a red, that's a fugitive color, and I never used it because it was a fugitive color. So I would just say there are enough 1s and 2s to get by. I don't really think, hopefully you don't have to go to a 3. If you do use a 3, then I would use it sparingly, and then definitely don't hang it in the sunlight. So with that, I'm going to put these questions aside and open it up to anyone who has a question. Again, if you have one, please just put it in all caps. I can scroll through these questions and see if anyone has one. Again, put it in all caps so I can locate it quickly. Okay, so Flora Doler has a question. What are your reasons for not visiting galleries or museums, as you suggested earlier? Just curious. I know it's really weird, isn't it, that I don't. And it's not that I never do, because if I go to New York, if I go to Miami, or I will go. I live in a very small town. There's not much here, so maybe it's partly that I just don't even have access to a lot. I also get I have, favorite artists and all that. And, if I had an opportunity to go see Van Gogh's work, I have gone and done that, and kind of seek out the artists whose work I really, really love. But at the same time, I'm not, I think my main goal with painting and artwork is to figure out who I am deep down. And I often don't want to be influenced by other people. I don't want to be influenced by the outside world. And it's kind of a weird thing. It's almost like I shut it out. And I don't think it's that I'm too easily influenced by things that I see. I will say there's a lot I see that I don't care for. And I sometimes I wonder if it's more that, when I go to a museum, and I'm just not one of those people who can admire like the majority of what I see. I feel like I'm kind of hypercritical, and that's probably not a good thing, but I get frustrated when I go to museums and I see work that I either just, I don't know, I don't feel very inspired, I guess. I mean, if I'm not seeing more that inspires me, and I'm seeing more that doesn't inspire me, then that's going to turn me away. I guess that's just all I can really say. So let's see, looking for another question here. Oh, what do I buff with? Okay, and I think the question there would probably pertain to the cold wax medium. Just a soft cotton cloth. I wouldn't use a paper towel. Paper towels are, they're not cotton. They're They're like a wood-based product. So I would just use a nice soft cotton sheet or flannel, something like that. And, you can kind of reuse it again and again and just buff it. Yeah, Neoglip, that's a Gamblin product, and it is used for making a glaze with your oil paints. I don't personally use it because I like to keep things more simple. It's actually Neomeglip. It's quite a handful to say. I've talked to Gamblin about that product, and it is used for glazing. All I can say, and I use cold wax medium and Gelka gel, and I think I probably get similar results. The rule of thirds or golden ratio in your compositions. That's a great question from Tony Grima. I don't know what to tell you. I personally have not really, I'm going to be really embarrassed when I say this. I don't have a graphic design background, and in all of my years of schooling and all the books I've had, I have not really read very much about this at all. So do I use it? I guess I'd have to say no, but I'm wondering if I do use it and I just don't know that I'm using it. I've actually tried to even understand it, but maybe you can tell me what it is, or somebody there can tell me, because I'm pretty dumb when it comes to things like that. I don't know. I think I should look more into it. That's a good question, and I'm embarrassed that I don't know. I apologize. Rob, question: do you think your work and your work process is changing in this current situation? Well, I mean, I definitely have ideas of what I would paint if I were responding to the pandemic. But as some of you know, like, I went through this very long period of my life when I did a 2-year. I worked toward a solo museum exhibition that was all about pandemics. It was all about pathogens. My husband works at a level 4 facility where they study 30 of the world's most deadly pathogens. So they are working on coronavirus right now. And right after I did my, let me think here, my Holter Museum show, let me think. Actually, it might have been before that. Sorry, I get it confused. Yeah, it was before that. Sorry. I got all these electron micrographs of all the pathogens: smallpox, poliovirus, measles, streptococcus, Ebola. And when you look at an electron micrograph, you're looking at it at, it's actually quite beautiful when you look at any of these things. So that's kind of what I saw, was that these things are really horrible. They can kill us, yet when you look at them, they're beautiful. Now, I've seen, as you've all seen, images of the coronavirus, and it's actually quite lovely. It's this ball with these little things sticking out. It's the whole corona idea is the fact that it's got these little things, the prongs around it, and it's quite beautiful. But I feel like I've kind of, that part of me, I know it's a deadly virus. I know we're in a pandemic, and I know that, like, it's horrible what it's doing to our country, our world. It's also part of nature. And it's that whole deadly beautiful thing, which is what I tried to portray. For 2 years, I drew pathogens, and I'm going to be talking more about ubiquitous because it very much relates to that. So for me to revisit that again, it's like I feel like I've already done that. It's kind of like when you do a series and you want to explore something, and 2 years is a kind of a long time to be devoted to one topic. And I do feel like I definitely could express myself. I have some ideas, but I don't think it would be like an in-depth series. I'm impacted by the virus, but I almost want to feel like my art is impervious to this thing. Like, I don't think the pandemic is going to impact my art, because I like to just, I don't know, maybe escape it. Maybe it's an escape. But I hope that other artists are definitely using this time period to, and I know they have. I've seen it in Watch, Learn, Grow, and I'm really happy to see that. But I think for me, I can't tell you how exhausted I was after I did that exhibit. I had large glass installation panels, and I casted people's feet, like 30 different people with plaster. It was just such a huge ordeal. I had the glass etched in New Jersey. I had to have it shipped to me, and it was like, I think I just expanded. In fact, I had some of the things I did in that show that were related to the coronavirus. They were SARS, and SARS is one of the coronaviruses. So in answer to your question, the painting I did yesterday, which is a slop board, it turned out to be really, really bright. And I think that when I enter my studio, it's like, I don't know. I'm not thinking about the world so much. I did in the past, like when I had a lot of anxiety and things like that. My art was all about that. And but as I mentioned, I've purged it out of me by majorly reacting to the fear, anxiety, pain, and depression I used to have. I got it out there in such a big way that I literally feel like, okay. And I think that's why art is very therapeutic. Like if you can purge something out of your system, it's worth it to do it in a very full way. But once you've done it, I don't feel the need to go back there again. I feel like I can still come into my studio and just have joy, if that makes any sense. So, okay, great question, Rob. Question, if you work mostly in a smaller format like 6x9, 12x12, how do you scale up to a larger format, especially with oil and cold wax medium that doesn't have a fluid consistency? Okay, great question, Linda Harris. Okay, so I asked the very same question when I wanted to scale up from, say, 8x10 size larger. And the advice I was given was to do things gradually. So if you're used to like this 8x10 size and you want to go to 12x12, and then you want to go to 24x24, like what I wouldn't recommend is going from 8x10 to 4 feet by 4 feet. You want to like, increase each dimension by a few inches at a time, get comfortable, then increase a few inches each dimension again. Do it gradually. Another thing you can do is work in a series. So if you have 8x10 is your common size, and you put 4 of those together, work on them as a series, and then you might be able to like hang them kind of close together, and it has the feeling of it being larger than what you had to work on. As far as like how you scale up, it depends on like your genre of if you're painting in a realistic way, you can draw a grid on your, if you have a small painting, you can have a piece of acetate, which is see-through, and draw a grid with Sharpie, a perfect grid. And then let's say it's 8x10, and then you say want to go 8 times, you want it 4 times bigger. So 8 times 4 is 32, 10 times 4 is 40, so 32 by 40. That's your new dimension. And then you draw the very same grid, like if it's 8x10. So you've got like 4x5, something like that. In terms of divisions, and you want to make sure that the other grid on your larger panel has the very same number of grids. And then you just kind of sketch it in. So you get a feeling for like, well, this shape here is going to be 4 times bigger over here. And instead of guessing, you've got a grid. So there are books written on that kind of thing of scaling up. If you're more abstract, then I would just say that you could freehand it and just get the gesture, get the feel. It's really good to identify what it is about that smaller painting that you're trying to capture. I think what I like for me, I actually brought in my son's painting that he did when he was like 5 years old, and I was going to use this as an idea for, because somebody had suggested in this contest that I copy master. And I thought, well, I'm going to I saw my son's work and I thought, I really like that. So I thought I would use that as an example of how I would scale that up. Colors, shapes, lines and that kind of thing, not copying it, but just like being inspired by it. So I would say a grid if it's more realistic, and if it's not realistic, then you can kind of freeform it. So I hope that answers your question. Gordon asks, do I ever use a gloss varnish? I have in the past, but the reason I'd use a gloss varnish on an acrylic would be that I want it really glossy. And the reason I don't use a gloss varnish on a cold wax medium painting is because if you go over 25% cold wax medium to oils, you're not supposed to use a gloss varnish. Even though I had Gamvar, I had bought it thinking that I was going to use it. And then when I reached out to Gamble and they said, no, no, no. If you use like 1-to-1 cold wax medium to oils, you don't want to use Gamvar. And I was kind of surprised because I think I had done it earlier and they're like, no, you shouldn't do that. The only varnish you need on up to a 1-to-1 cold wax medium and oil painting is cold wax medium without the Galca gel. That's all you need. Okay. All right. Susan Murphy. I often overwork smaller pieces once I separate them, started on a large piece of paper, and lose the cohesion and energy that was in the larger piece. Any thoughts or comments? Okay. So you overwork the smaller pieces. So you're saying that, are you saying that when you've got 4 together, for instance, you're kind of free and loose, but the minute you cut them apart and try to finish them, you get too tight? Is that what you mean? If so, yeah, I think that there is a tendency to do that. That's one reason why I think scaling up is actually quite nice, because the whole thing that happens when you scale up that I've noticed about myself, okay, thank you, is that, you've got your arm movements. I've like literally walked, past an 8-foot painting and just like not looked at it. Your tools get larger. You're just not going to, it's a totally different feel. Anyone who's worked large kind of knows that. But what I think is important is to not go, say, from small to large and stay large. I think the best thing to do is to be able to do them all equally well, meaning if you want to be loose, then, feel the looseness of working large, but then bring that feeling to the smaller thing. And how do you do that? Like you said, when you've got 4 together, you treat them as one. It's bigger. When you separate them, remember to go off the edge. Have a scrap sheet of paper underneath that 5x7 or 6x9. And when you make marks, if you do a monoprint or something, go off the edge. It's the feeling that there still are no edges that you have to be concerned about that will make your small painting feel large. Okay. And hi there, White Elephant. Susan Hale, question. When a painting becomes very dry, is when you haven't worked on it, okay, right, in a while. Should you apply a thin, probably a layer, a bit of cold wax medium over it before you begin adding more layers? The answer to that is yes, you can reactivate a surface with a thin layer of cold wax medium over a dry painting, but like just yesterday, I had a slop board, and it hadn't been drying for 6 months or anything, but it was pretty dry, and I just like dove right back into it, and there was no problem. You don't have to put a layer of cold wax medium on there, but you can. I would say it's kind of optional. If it's really old, yeah, if it makes you feel better, then I guess I would do that. Yes. Okay, everyone. Just going to see if there's any other questions here. Okay, Colette. I think I will take one more question from Colette. Let me just see if I can find it again because it just disappeared on me. Okay, well, I want to add a rough texture to a oil painting. I think you meant cold wax medium and oil painting I'm doing. Okay, which has many layers. It's quite dry now. How might I do that? I do want to add a few more layers of paint over the texture. Okay, so you want to add a rough texture to the painting and it's already dry. Yeah, there's no, just because it's dry doesn't mean you can't pick up where you left off. I would just sort of like forget the fact that it's dry, put a little bit of cold wax medium over it, let it sit for 20 minutes, and then pretend like, you're just mix up a lot of paint. The thicker it is, the more you can texture it with texturing materials, rollers, brayers, fabrics, things you find at the thrift store, all kinds of tools. I would just texture it up and then, let that set a little bit because you don't want to work into it when it's too gloppy. And then you can proceed with glazing. You can sand it back, but we're talking a pretty long amount of time to let things dry before you can really go back into it and work with that textured painting. If it's too thick, the thicker it is, the longer you have to wait. So Quick announcement tomorrow. I am going to attempt to do a demo of painting from scratch on a 12 by 12 inch ampersand panel. I'm going to put my iPad overhead. It's going to be looking down on my table. I've got a microphone. I'm hoping it's going to work. But like I said in my email, for those of you who got it, I mean, there's a lot of tech stuff going on here, and maybe I'll have an alternative setup in case I have to work on my wall. But my wall right now is more for photography. I'm in that mode now. So I'm going to try and do this thing overhead and see what happens. So again, if you guys like this content, please hit the like button. Yeah, I guess it makes me feel good to know that somebody out there liked the Q&A, and I'll do more of them if you guys like them. And make sure you're subscribed so that if you want a notification email, you'll get one if you're subscribed, especially if you hit the little notification bell. Otherwise, you won't get an email telling you that I went live or whatever. And keep the questions coming. The contest ends on May 1st, midnight, Mountain Daylight Time. The form to fill in to enter this is underneath this video in the description box. It's right below the video. Thank you again for being here. It's a Saturday, and I really enjoyed having you guys here, and thanks for the great questions. It's really fun to spend this time with you. I wish we could actually talk one-on-one, but this is the next best thing. So I hope to see you guys tomorrow. I will do the best I can. I will probably be doing the demo for about an hour because I can't have a microphone and be plugging in my iPad at the same time. So when my iPad poops out, then I guess that's it. So thanks everybody for being here. And it's really great. Thank you so much. And I'll see you next time. Okay. Bye.